done. So always remember the renal vein is very close to the IVC.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So there are more chances of vascular injuries. Fine. So
Yes,
that
ma'am.
is why you need to be more careful. And what happens in case of transplant? Why is the length important?
No, I don't know, ma'am.
Okay, no problem. Pooja,
Hello. Yes, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am.
good evening. Can you tell me in transplant on the base? I'll give you a hint on the basis of the length of the renal artery and vein. Which for the donor, which side nephrectomy is preferred? In the donor, we generally prefer the left side. Okay, because
Okay.
you get a longer renal, the surgeon gets a longer renal vein. Okay, although a shorter artery, but it's always the longer renal vein. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Okay. So by and large, now Gautam, you will tell me what are the functions of a kidney.
Ma'am, as far as the functions of the kidney is concerned, it can be divided broadly into excretory functions, secretory functions, and endocrinology functions, ma'am, and of course
Okay.
synthetic functions. So
Hmm.
the main function of the kidney is being formation of urine is comes under
Hmm.
the excretionary part. Then it
Hmm.
also has a lot of synthetic. It also produces a lot of substances like erythropoietin, which is important for hemoglobin production. It also helps in the final metabolism of the vitamin calcitriol formation. So which eventually helps in calcium absorption also, vitamin D
Hmm.
metabolism. And other than that, it also helps in the most other important function of the kidney will be the acid base balance of in the body, ma'am. Along with
Okay.
it, it also helps us in maintaining the fluid and electrolyte balance inside the body.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah,
Okay. These are the broad functions of a kidney.
kidneys, yes,
Fine.
ma'am.
Okay. Now Ramanathan will tell me the structure of a glomerulus. We'll discuss about the basic structure of a glomerulus. So afferent arterioles and efferent arterioles. From where does the afferent arteriole come and where does the efferent arteriole go? Ramanathan? Okay, Samritti?
Hello. Yes, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah, Pooja. Okay, Pooja, can you tell me what is the
Actually,
afferent arteriole and what is the efferent arteriole?
ma'am, I'm Samriti. Actually, my phone is
Okay.
not working.
No
I'm
problem,
attending
Samritti.
from Pooja's phone.
Okay, Samriti, no problem. Can you tell
Ma'am,
me what is the
if
afferent and efferent arteriole?
ma'am, afferent arteriole, it goes into the glomerulus and it arises from an interlobular artery,
Okay.
and then it forms the plexus, and when exiting from the glomerulus, it forms afferent arteriole.
Okay. So the afferent arteriole is the one which is bringing the blood into the nephrons
Glomerulus.
or in the glomerulus. Okay. And it is exiting out by the efferent arteriole. All right.
Yes, ma'am.
So, okay, fine. Thank you. Okay. Now, Satish will describe the structure of a glomerulus.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, hello.
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
Satish.
Hello. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, glomerulus contains afferent arteriole, as now discussed, ma'am, and then efferent
Hmm.
arteriole, ma'am. And then
Hmm.
in between, we have the glomerular tuft of capillaries. And then
Hmm.
at the efferent arteriole, it forms the macula densa and the juxtaglomerular apparatus, ma'am. The
Okay.
macula densa, which comes the juxtaglomerular apparatus. And then the glomerular capillaries is the main part of filtration, ma'am, and it has like glomerular capillaries, then Bowman's
Okay,
basement
Satish,
membrane.
sorry to interrupt you. Can you
Yes, ma'am.
describe the layers of, okay, basically what you're doing right now is that the glomerulus is responsible for the filtration, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So
Yes,
can
ma'am.
you describe the layers of the filtration membrane for me?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, first capillaries, ma'am, glomerular capillary endothelium, ma'am. Then
Okay,
basement
from
membrane.
inside to outside. Okay,
Okay, ma'am.
glomerular
So
endothelium, fine. Yes.
yes, ma'am. Then basement membrane, ma'am.
Mhm.
Then food processor of Bowman's epithelial cells will come, ma'am. Then the filtrate will go into the Bowman space.
Okay, I'll just like to elaborate a little that there are 5 layers. Okay, the first layer
Yes,
from inside to outside would be your capillary endothelium. Fine.
yes, ma'am.
The second one would be your basement membrane. The
Yes,
third
ma'am.
and the fourth will be your visceral and the parietal epithelium of the Bowman's capsule. And the
Absolutely.
fifth,
Yes, ma'am.
are your either mesangial cells.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay, in the glomerulus, which is inside the glomerulus. Okay, the function of these cells, which we'll be dealing later. Okay,
Yes.
thank you, Satish.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, can now, after Satish, Surbhi. Surbhi will describe the process of filtration.
Hello, good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Surbhi.
Um,
What does the filtration depend upon?
Ma'am, it depends on the hydrostatic pressure of Bowman's capsule, then capillaries and the osmotic pressure, ma'am.
Okay. Does it have to do anything with the properties, physical and charged properties of the
Yes, ma'am.
filtrate per se?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, it depends on the size. Like albumin is not filtered,
Hmm.
and the
So,
charge.
molecules with an effective radius of less than
4.
1.8 nanometer are easily filtered. Okay. And
Yes, ma'am.
solutes of diameter of more than 3.6 are not filtered. Okay, the bigger
Yes, ma'am.
ones remain in the system and the smaller ones are filtered. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
what happens to to those molecules which are between 1.8 and 3.6 nanometer radius?
Ma'am, don't know.
That filtration is charge dependent because the basement membrane per se is negatively
Negative
charged.
charge.
So
Yes, ma'am.
those substances which have a radius between 1.8 to 3.6 and are negatively charged, they are repelled by the basement
Negative.
membrane.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes.
so that's why. Now Varsha will tell me about the Starling's equation and the Starling forces.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Varsha.
uh, Ma'am, it determines the glomerular filtration pressure, and it depends on capillary hydrostatic pressure, and it is directly proportional to the capillary hydrostatic pressure and inversely proportional to the capillary osmotic pressure, and directly proportional to
See, Varsha, we'll
Bowman.
just simplify a little. There are
Yes, ma'am.
two kinds of forces. One is the hydrostatic and one is the osmotic pressure.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
oncotic pressure, the osmotic pressure. Oncotic pressure, fine. So the hydrostatic pressure of the of the
Capillary.
capillary.
Yes, ma'am.
So what does the hydrostatic pressure of the capillary do? It
Ma'am, it
favors
favors the
filtration.
filtration. Yes, ma'am.
So it pushes the fluid out,
Out.
right? And
Yes,
what will
ma'am.
the oncotic pressure of the capillary do?
It opposes the filtration.
Okay, very good. And what about the fluid in the Bowman's capsule, the hydrostatic pressure of the Bowman's capsule, what will it do?
It opposes the filtration, and the oncotic pressure of the Bowman's capsule will favor the filtration.
Okay, fine. So these, anything else on which the filtration depends?
Ma'am, the amount of blood flowing to the glomerular.
That is your hydrostatic pressure. There's something known as ultrafiltration coefficient, which is directly proportional to the glomerular surface area and the capillary permeability. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
fine. This equation is very important. Okay, now Vidhan will tell me, given the Starling's equation, why is renal blood flow important?
Hello, ma'am.
Hello.
No idea, ma'am.
Okay, no problem. Vijayvani will explain why is renal blood flow important for ultrafiltration.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, Vijayvani.
Ma'am, because the glomerular oncotic pressure is dependent on the blood flow, ma'am.
No, the hydrostatic pressure is dependent on the renal blood flow, and the hydrostatic pressure is the main pressure which drives filtration. See, more the renal blood flow, more the hydrostatic pressure, more the filtration. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
So that is why to maintain GFR, renal blood flow is most important. This is the whole crux of the class. Renal blood flow. Okay?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, fine. Now, Amir will explain to me what is the juxtaglomerular apparatus. I don't think I can hear him. Ananya? Ananya Sharma?
Hello. Hello.
Yes, Ananya. Can you tell me what is the juxtaglomerular apparatus?
Yes, ma'am. Hello.
Yes, Ananya, tell
Ma'am,
me.
the juxtaglomerular apparatus is a small organ within each nephron, which
Is it
consists
an organ?
Ma'am, in each nephron, it consists of an efferent arteriole, glomerulus, and an efferent arteriole. Along with there are JG cells
Specialized
within
cells. Okay.
within its wall, and at the end of the thick ascending cortical segment of the loop of Henle, then there is macula densa. The specialized cells, that the JG cells, they contain the enzyme renin, and it is innervated by the sympathetic nervous system.
They produce renin.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And okay, fine. Okay, Ananya. Okay, Barney will answer the question now. What is the effect of the afferent and the efferent arterioles? How is the GFR modulated?
Ma'am, good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, I couldn't hear.
Good evening. Sorry?
Hello? Ma'am, I couldn't
Yes.
hear properly.
Yeah, I'll repeat.
Ma'am.
How is the GFR modulated? Like suppose if the GFR of the body is decreasing. Okay. So what will the kidneys do by regulating the size of the afferent or the efferent arterioles?
Ma'am, usually constriction. It will cause constriction of the efferent arterioles, and it causes changes in the GFR.
Just say that again, please. I didn't get it.
Ma'am, usually it causes constriction in the efferent arteriole, and it causes a difference, variation in the GFR.
So you mean to say, suppose there is a dip in the GFR, okay, and the kidney wants to maintain it.
Okay.
Fine. So there'll be a constriction in the afferent or the efferent arteriole?
Efferent arteriole.
Efferent arteriole.
Ma'am.
So this will increase the filtration fraction.
Sure.
But suppose there is increase in GFR and the kidney doesn't want to work so much, then what will happen?
Don't know.
Okay, no problem. Basavaraj will tell me what will happen when the GFR is increased. What will happen to the diameter of the afferent and the efferent arterioles?
Ma'am, both sides it will constriction happens, ma'am. So
Yes,
that there is
very
a less blood flow.
both sides it will constrict, but preferably more on the afferent arteriole. So the kidney says it doesn't want to work at all. So if there's increased GFR, the afferent arteriole will constrict more.
Yes,
okay. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Deepti?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. Now, you just heard Basavaraj say that if Basavaraj and Barney said that if there is hypotension, there is decrease in GFR.
Yes, ma'am.
So, we will get constriction of the efferent arterioles.
Yes, ma'am. Efferent arteriole will be constricted so that the hypertension can be overcome by the decreased GFR.
Okay. But suppose there is prolonged hypotension and sympathetic response, what will happen?
Ma'am, due to this, there will be activation of the RAS.
Okay, now since you've said that very nice term, please explain it.
Ma'am, due to the activation of RAS system, there will be...
what is the RAS system?
Ma'am, renin-angiotensin converting system.
Okay, what is it?
Increase the... it actually like tell the hypothalamus and the brain to release the hormones which actually constrict the vessels and provide creating.
See, it's basically what we discussed is it's a part of the juxtaglomerular system. Fine.
Yes, ma'am.
So the juxtaglomerular system has mainly the afferent, the efferent, and the specialized cells, which are the macula densa. Okay.
Yes.
So suppose you get a low GFR. Fine. So there are macula densa has chemoreceptors. Fine. So they get activated. So they produce a substance in the afferent arteriole which is known as renin. Okay. Now what does this renin do? This is stimulated by hypovolemia, right?
Yes.
So what does this renin do further now?
Ma'am, it actually release the angiotensin 1 and which...
It acts on angiotensinogen.
Yes, ma'am.
You haven't read about it. Dwara? Dwara?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain the renin-angiotensinogen aldosterone system, please?
Yes, ma'am. The renin which is secreted by the Golgi cells of the juxtaglomerular apparatus is stimulated by hypovolemia. Whenever there is hypovolemia, this renin usually converts the angiotensinogen which is produced by the liver to angiotensin 1. The angiotensin 1 which is produced is further converted into angiotensin 2 by angiotensin converting enzyme, which is produced by the kidney, lung, or the smooth muscles or the WBC cells. The angiotensin 2, which is secreted, will act on the angiotensin receptors of the body, and it will cause vasoconstriction. So there will be, whenever there is hypotension, there will be vasoconstriction, and thereby there will be accumulation of the fluid homeostasis.
Okay, one thing I want to make it very clear that first, initially, whenever there is hypotension, so renin, angiotensinogen, they first act on the efferent arteriole and they try to maintain the filtration pressure. But what happens is when there is prolonged hypotension, the sympathetic system gets activated and angiotensinogen, renin, and when they are in a greater amount. See, initially when the hypotension, there is constriction, renal cortical constriction. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And the medulla is preserved. Please understand this, that in renal blood flow, initially there will be vasoconstriction in the efferent arteriole, and the body will try to increase the GFR. But if there is prolonged hypotension and sympathetic activation, only then do these systems such as RAS and all, they get activated, and then the GFR starts to decrease. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Fine. Okay. Since we are on renal blood flow only, first we'll finish this topic. So Jairam will tell me what is renal autoregulation.
Hello.
Yes, Jairam.
Hello, ma'am. Renal autoregulation means it is the maintenance of the constant renal blood flow over a wide range of the mean arterial pressure. It ranges from 80 mm mercury, 70 mm mercury to 130 mm mercury.
Okay.
If renal perfusion pressure is high, then afferent arterial wall will be stretched, and then contraction of the afferent arteriole. Then the diameter decreases and resistance to the renal blood flow increases, and renal blood flow remains constant in that pressure. Then if the perfusion pressure is low, if the perfusion pressure is low, then again afferent arteriole dilates and the resistance to the renal blood flow decreases and renal blood flow increases, so that renal blood flow will be maintained through this over the wide range of this mean arterial pressure. And there are two. This is myogenic mechanism, and another one mechanism, that is tubuloglomerular tubuloglomerular feedback mechanism. In this case, if renal blood flow is more, then the glomerular filtration rate will also be more. Then the amount of chloride and the sodium which is delivered to the juxtaglomerular apparatus will also be more. That will be sensed by the macular densa, and then which in turn release adenosine. Adenosine cause vasoconstriction of the afferent arteriole and decrease the renal blood flow. And macular densa will release renin. Again, it causes constriction
Activation of the RAS system.
Activation of the RAS system, and then which in turn causes constriction of the afferent arteriole more than the afferent arteriole. And overall, the resistance to the renal blood flow also decreases.
Okay, now Meghna will answer what happens in cases of hypertensive patients.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Meghna.
Ma'am, in case of hypertensive patients, since the mean arterial pressure is on the higher side, the GFR will be increased, the filtrate will be increased. So this will be sensed by the juxtaglomerular apparatus.
Okay, fine. Coming to the clinical implication, I wanted to know the clinical implication of autoregulation. Supposing a patient comes to you with a BP of 160, 95 or so. So intra-op, what would be your concern for the GFR?
Ma'am, we should try to maintain the map within 70 to 130 millimeter of mercury, so that
between 15 to 20%, because the autoregulation is set at a higher level. Okay, so for a normal patient, maybe you can have a map of up till 65 or 70, they can have a renal autoregulation. But in hypertensive, that limit is a little higher. Maybe say 75, 80.
Yes,
so whatever the baseline BP is there, greater than 20% map, drop in the map will,
that
the
causes
kidney will not be dysregulation in the GFR. Okay. And the renal blood flow. Okay, fine. Now coming to the Naresh, you will tell me what is a nephron.
Hello.
Yes, Naresh.
Ma'am, nephron is a basic unit of basic functional unit of the kidney, and there are I will tell
There are
the
two types of nephrons. What are the two types of nephrons? One is the cortical and the other is?
medulla. Ma'am, at the junction of the cortex and medulla, mostly the
Juxtamedullary nephrons. What is the
juxtamedullary.
difference between cortical and juxtamedullary nephrons?
Ma'am, in cortical nephrons, the most of the part of the loop of Henle, the glomerulus, proximal convoluted tubule, and distal convoluted tubule, they are mostly in the cortical.
So basically what you have is the juxtamedullary nephrons. They have a very long loop of Henle. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. So now Neha will tell me which one is more, cortical or juxtamedullary nephrons?
Cortical nephrons are more.
How much? What is the percentage? 90% are cortical and the rest 10% are the medullary. Any clinical significance of this?
Ma'am, blood supply is more in the cortex area and less in the medullary area.
Okay.
So in medullary area, they are more prone for ischemia.
Okay. The oxygen tension is also on the higher side in the cortical ones and it is lower in the medulla. So they are more prone for ischemia. What happens when there is hypotension?
Ma'am, acute kidney injury, renal injury can happen in these areas.
Context of what happens is when there is hypotension, what I'm trying to stress upon is that whenever there is an activation, prolonged hypotension or sympathetic axis activation, so blood supply is diverted from the cortical region. Okay. So, and not from the medullary region. So this is a renoprotective mechanism. Main work is done by the medullary nephrons. We'll come to this. Okay, Neha?
Okay.
Okay. Now, Nisha will, we've already from the nephron, the basic structure of the kidney, we've already discussed the glomerulus. Now, the glomerulus further continues as the proximal tubule. So, Nisha will describe the proximal tubule and its functions in short.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, Nisha.
Ma'am, the proximal convoluted tubule is mainly involved in the reabsorption process, ma'am.
What percentage of fluid is reabsorbed in the proximal tubule?
Ma'am, 65% of
65
sodium
to
is
75% is reabsorbed isotonically. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you tell me, you go on.
Ma'am, along with that, glucose and amino acids are also reabsorbed along with the ions, ma'am, like sodium, potassium, and bicarb, ma'am.
So you mean to say all the anions, glucose, and all those things are reabsorbed in the PCT?
Proximal. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. What organic ions are excreted out?
Ma'am, by phosphates.
They are secreted. Some proximal tubules are also responsible for secreting some organic cations and anions. Can you name them?
Ma'am, phosphate, hydrogen ions.
The cations are generally creatinine, cimetidine, and quinidine. Okay. And the organic ions such as urate, ketoacids, penicillins, cephalosporins, and diuretics. They are secreted out in this PCT. Okay.
Yes,
now, okay. So after Nisha, Pooja will explain what happens to sodium and water in the PCT.
Hello.
Yes, Pooja.
Ma'am,
In the PCT, ma'am.
Yes.
Then water goes out along with the sodium in the proximal part of the PCT. And sodium is also exchanged
Is
with
it an
glucose
active
and
process? Is it an active process, sodium reabsorption, or is it a passive process?
active transport of sodium reabsorption. And
What
there
do
is
you
a
mean by active transport?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, active as well as co-transport of sodium with passive transport of water in the PCT.
What
ma'am.
is active transport, Pooja?
Then the transport of the ion along with the use of ATP.
Okay, so ATP is sodium, potassium, ATPase channels are there. Okay, so how many sodiums are pumped in and how many are pumped out? Potassium are pumped out?
Then 2 is to 1 ratio.
Poonam, can you help her?
One is to 1.
Poonam?
Then 1 is to 1 ratio. ma'am.
No. Rajeshwari?
Hello.
Yes, can you tell me about the sodium, potassium and chloride exchange in the PCT, please? Yes, Rajeshwari.
3:2, ma'am.
Yes. So 3:2. So what happens? What goes in 3 and what comes in? 3 sodium are pumped out and 2 potassium are pumped in. Right?
Yes, ma'am.
So what happens to the charge? The intracellular, if you are pumping out 3 sodium and pumping in 2, so it will be a less positive charge inside, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So what happens to the, so why is it important? So sodium reabsorption at the luminal membrane is also coupled with secretion of the hydrogen ion. Okay, to compensate for the loss of charge. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, Gautam, you will tell me what happens to the bicarbonate in the PCT.
Bicarb usually gets absorbed along with sodium, ma'am, and bicarb is the way is absorbed through CO2, ma'am. Like it is absorbed as bicarb and it is converted into CO2 and it is then transported to the bloodstream again as bicarb, ma'am, with help of CA anhydrase enzyme.
Okay, very good.
It is going to speed up the process, ma'am.
Okay. So what happens in the patients of CRF?
CRF patients, ma'am.
Yes. This mechanism is hampered.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, so there is loss of bicarbonate.
Loss of bicarb, which leads to the acidosis in their body.
Yes, that is why they have chronic metabolic
acidosis. Ma'am.
Okay, this is the main reason.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Okay, fine. So in the PCT, basically there occurs resorption of sodium chloride, water, bicarbonate, glucose, and secretion of organic ions and cations. Now, I would like Samriti to tell me about the loop of Henle, its structure and its function.
Hello.
Yes, Samriti.
Ma'am, loop of Henle, it has a thin descending loop.
Okay, so
And,
why does it have a thin descending limb?
Ma'am, it has a thin descending loop and a thick ascending limb.
Okay. So what happens? What is absorbed in the thin ascending limb and what is absorbed in the thick ascending limb?
Ma'am, in the descending limb, ma'am, mostly osmoregulation occurs in loop of Henle. So, the descending it is permeable to water, and the ascending limb is impermeable to water.
So in the descending limb, basically sodium and water are reabsorbed, but more of water is reabsorbed. Okay, and in the thick ascending limb, it is impermeable to water, and basically sodium is reabsorbed in the thick ascending limb. Now Satish will tell me what is counter current mechanism.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, Satish.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, counter current is like both artery and vein run in parallel, ma'am.
Okay.
So that it creates this medullary interstitium, whenever, ma'am, because of sodium getting reabsorbed, sodium getting filtered, ma'am, so that it creates the osmolarity will increase in the interstitium, ma'am.
Actually, the thing is that basically it's for there are two pipes. Suppose there are two pipes running in opposite directions. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
The loop
Yes,
of
ma'am.
Henle. Okay. And now you have the medulla, which is very hypertonic.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So
Yes,
for
ma'am.
this hypertonic, what happens is in the thin descending limb, the water is reabsorbed. If it is reabsorbed into the medulla, what will happen? Your
Hyperosmolarity
tonicity of
will
the medulla will decrease.
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Hypoosmolarity. Yes, ma'am.
So to avoid that, what happens is there are peritubular capillaries which carries blood in the opposite direction and they pull out water from the thin descending limb.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
So this maintains the tonicity of the medulla.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the role of urea in this medular tonicity?
Ma'am, it is basically in the collecting duct, ma'am. It is it also maintains the osmolarity, ma'am, medullary interstitial osmolarity. But
And there's a
it
passive
actually,
cycle of reabsorption from the collecting duct. And it is again recycled from the collecting duct and the loop of Henle to maintain the tonicity. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Fine. Now, so the nephron we've studied, it goes from the glomerulus, then the PCT, then the loop of Henle. Now, Surbhi will tell me what percentage of sodium and water is reabsorbed in the loop of Henle.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Surbhi?
Ma'am, don't know.
Okay.
It is passively.
Varsha will tell me what percentage of sodium and water is reabsorbed in. Okay, only sodium. What level of what percentage of sodium is reabsorbed in the thick ascending loop of Henle?
Ma'am, 15 to 20% of the filtered sodium is reabsorbed in the loop of Henle.
Okay, very nice. So, how I think it is not very clear, but what happens exactly in the loop of Henle to the osmolarity when the urine filtration is filtered from the PCT and it goes into the thin descending limb.
Yes,
Satish
ma'am.
just said that, so water is absorbed. So does the fluid become hypertonic or hypotonic?
Ma'am, the tubular fluid, when it enters the descending limb, is normally isotonic because in
Okay.
PCT, the isotonic reabsorption happens. But as it goes through the descending limb into the thin ascending limb and thick ascending limb, due to countercurrent mechanism, the tubular fluid becomes hypertonic.
Hypotonic. Hyper or hypo?
It becomes hypertonic as it leaves
See,
the.
what happens is basically when it goes into the thin descending limb, sorry, the water is reabsorbed. So that time it becomes hypertonic. Okay. But as it
Yes.
goes through the ascending limb, the sodium is also reabsorbed. Okay.
Yes.
So the resulting fluid that flows out of the loop of Henle is actually hypotonic.
Okay, ma'am.
Fine.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what two substances are very importantly absorbed in the thick ascending loop of Henle apart from water and sodium?
Ma'am, calcium and magnesium. Parathyroid hormone acts on the distal part of the thick ascending limb of loop of Henle, and it leads to the it's responsible for the calcium reabsorption.
Okay, fine. Now, after we move from the loop of Henle, Vidhan will tell me about the distal tubule.
Ma'am, distal tubule found by simple coadal epithelium and selective reabsorption occurs here.
Okay.
Ma'am,
What percentage of sodium is reabsorbed here?
ma'am, sodium reabsorption is 5%.
Okay, around 5% of the sodium is reabsorbed. How is it reabsorbed?
Ma'am, sodium potassium ATPase pump.
Activity. Okay, so it is an active process.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and that is mediated by what?
Ma'am, ma'am, don't know.
Okay. Vijayvani?
Ma'am?
Sodium reabsorption is dependent upon what in distal tubules?
Sodium absorption again on ATPase, sodium potassium ATPase pump only, ma'am.
It is done by, and it is basically proportional to the sodium delivery. If there is more sodium, then it will be more. But this part is not hormonal. It is not hormonally mediated. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And what is the other main function of this distal tubule? What does it?
It is responsible for calcium reabsorption, ma'am.
Yes, it is a major site of parathyroid hormone and vitamin D mediated calcium reabsorption. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Vijayvani. Okay, Yazini will tell me about the collecting tubule.
Hello.
Yes, Yazini.
Ma'am, collecting tubule will determine the final osmolarity of urine. It is not permeable to any of the ions. Aquaporins are expressed in the collecting ducts, ma'am. And
see, it is basically the collecting tubule has two parts, cortical. There are two types, cortical and medullary. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So the cortical has two types of cells. the principal cells and the intercalated cells. So
Yes, ma'am.
principal cells mediate what? What is their function?
Ma'am, principal cells are responsible for sodium reabsorption through
Very
the
good.
ENaC channel, which is mediated by aldosterone.
Aldosterone mediated sodium reabsorption. And what about the intercalated cells?
Buffering of
Yes,
H
they are
plus ion.
responsible for acid-base regulation.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Ammonium and phosphate buffering of buffering happen in intercalated cells, ma'am.
Okay, fine. Now, Ankush will tell me in the collecting tubule, Yazini said sodium is reabsorbed, water is reabsorbed, and potassium and bicarbonate are also reabsorbed. What is secreted?
Ma'am, hydrogen ions are secreted from the collecting.
Okay, hydrogen, ammonia, and one more very
Ammonia.
important thing. See, when potassium, sodium is reabsorbed, potassium ions are secreted. Okay. So potassium is very important. Fine. Now, Ankush, you will tell me in the medullary collecting tubule, what is the function? What is the function of the medullary collecting tubule?
Ma'am, the function of the medullary collecting tubule is concentration of the urine.
Okay.
So
And this is done by which hormone?
From the aquaporins.
It is mediated by the through the aquaporins by which hormone? Which hormone acts on this collecting tubule?
Yes, ma'am.
Which hormone? The antidiuretic hormone.
Antidiuretic.
Okay. So who will? Okay. Now Basavaraj will tell me what is this antidiuretic hormone? How is it stimulated and what does it do?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, Basavaraj.
Whenever there is a hypovolemia, ma'am, due to dehydration, then there is a increased secretion of ADH.
Where is this secreted? How is it secreted?
It is produced from hypothalamus into the blood.
Okay, secreted from the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus? Posterior pituitary, not the hypothalamus. Posterior pituitary. Right? It is secreted in the anterior pituitary and then through the supraoptic nuclei it goes in and it is
bloodstream.
It is released through the posterior pituitary into the blood circulation. Right? So what does this ADH do now?
Ma'am, it actually induces this aquaporins at the lateral surface of the luminal membrane.
Okay. Okay.
So whenever there is hypovolemia, through tubular, through this luminal surface, through this channel, water will absorb in the body to maintain osmolality.
So to maintain, what is the normal osmolality of blood plasma?
290 milliosmoles per liter.
Okay. You should be more specific, but it's okay. Now Dwara will tell me what is the secretory function of medullary collecting tubules.
Yes, ma'am.
Dwara, can you tell me what is the secretory function of the medullary collecting tubules?
It secretes urea.
No. This part is basically responsible for acidifying the urine. So what will be secreted, Dwara?
H plus. Ma'am.
Yes.
From the intercalated cells, it's secreted from the H plus K plus ATPase and the It secretes the hydrogen.
The hydrogen ions are secreted in the form of titrable acids, phosphates, and ammonium ions. Okay?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, we have in your exam from renal physiology, what you get is the questions, short notes, what you generally get is nephron and renal blood flow. Okay? So briefly, we will, Jasmine, you will tell me about, you will just name what are the control mechanisms of renal blood flow. This might be a slight repetition, but since it's very important, I'd like to go through it again. Jasmine. Okay, Jairam.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, can you tell me what are the control mechanisms for renal blood flow?
Ma'am, yeah, myogenic reflex and tubuloglomerular.
Okay, there is intrinsic regulation, which is the myogenic response. Second, we studied about the tumuloglomerular feedback. Okay. Now, and third thing is the hormonal regulation. Can you tell me about hormonal regulation a little bit?
Ma'am, vasoconstrictor and vasodilators.
Okay, fine.
Adenosine is a vasoconstrictor and vasopressin and adenosine is a vasoconstrictor. And
so basically, neurohormonal regulation is basically a balance between the vasoconstrictors and the vasodilators. Can you tell me the two hormones which are vasoconstrictors?
hello, ma'am. Sympathetic.
The aldosterone and the ADH hormones.
Yes, ma'am.
So what do these vasoconstrictor systems do?
Vasoconstrictor afferent and efferent arteriole and decrease the renal blood flow and increase the resistance to the blood flow.
Okay, they decrease renal blood flow, they decrease GFR, and they decrease urine flow and decrease sodium excretion, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So, and the opposite happens with the vasodilator systems. Now you think about the clinical implication. Rajeshwari, you will tell me what happens when there is sympathetic, clinically why is sympathetic response very important to renal blood flow?
Ma'am, it increases the sodium resorption, ma'am.
Okay. See, हम लोग post-op, in the post-op, why do we keep saying patient should not have pain, patient should not have pain, patient should be comfortable? See, surgery is basically a stress. So whenever intra-op or post-op patient has stress, be it related to anything, surgery, anesthesia, pain, whatever. So this will cause sympathetic activation, which will activate the renin-angiotensin system, aldosterone, ADH. So there will be more accumulation of water and sodium in the body. That is why in the post-op you see patients are having edema. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So it is important that patients, the patients intra-op and post-op should be comfortable, so that there is less of sympathetic stimulation. Fine.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we've basically covered renal blood flow, nephron, and its structures. Now coming to evaluation of renal function. Okay. So now Meghna will tell me what are the clinical markers of renal function.
Ma'am, clinical markers of renal function are blood urea nitrogen
See,
and
first and foremost is urine output. Okay.
yes, ma'am.
What is normal urine output perioperatively?
Perioperatively 0.5 ml per kg per hour.
At least should be there to say that patient is not having oliguria. Meghna, suppose a surgery is going on, right? And
Yes,
the first hour of surgery, the patient had a good urine output, 100 ml per hour. Second hour surgery, patient had a urine output of 20 ml per hour. What would you do?
Ma'am, initially I would give fluid. I will give fluid, ma'am. 200 to 300 ml bolus. Then even though if the urine output is not adequate, even after that, then I will give diuretic.
Won't you check if your catheter is kinked?
Yes, ma'am.
So the first and foremost step is that you check for the tract and drainage. Okay, whether there is adequate drainage. Secondly, you think of hypovolemia, decrease in renal blood flow. Third, you think of the surgery per se, especially in pelvic surgeries. Okay, whether they are pressing upon the ureter. Okay, if you are in gynae OT and they are doing a cesarean section and you don't get urine output, you would suspect a ureteral injury or a bladder injury. Okay, then the position of the patient is important. If it is a Trendelenburg position, it impedes urine output drainage. Okay, so these are very clinical things which you should know.
Yes,
okay. Now, Naresh will tell me about other clinical parameters, markers of renal function.
Hello?
Yes, Naresh?
Hello? Yes, ma'am. Apart from urine output, we have serum creatinine, blood urea nitrogen, creatinine clearance, urine osmolarity,
Coming to blood urea nitrogen, how is nitrogen, urea nitrogen, this thing produced in the body?
and it is produced from the end metabolism of the proteins.
Of ammonia in the liver.
Urea is formed in the liver by deamination of amino acids and conversion to ammonia in the arginine cycle.
Okay. Why is it a measure of renal function?
Ma'am, because it is excreted, the urea is excreted from the kidneys, so it will tell us it is not an indicator of GFR because it is rapidly reabsorbed by the tubules, but it indicates whether the excretive function of the kidney is proper or not.
Okay. So what is the normal range of blood urea in the blood? Normal range?
Ma'am, normally it's 10 to 20 milligram per deciliter.
Okay. And what is blood urea to serum creatinine ratio?
Ma'am, 10 to 15:1.
And what does it imply if the ratio is increased?
Ma'am, it is useful in the diagnosis of renal failure from three renal causes versus acute tubular necrosis. So it tells us more of a pre-renal cause.
Pre-renal. Okay, fine, Naresh. Now Nisha will tell me about serum creatinine.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, Nisha. What is serum creatinine? Why do we measure it for kidney function?
Ma'am, creatinine is the metabolite of creatine phosphate, ma'am. After it is broken down, creatinine is formed. So it is freely filtered and secreted. It is and not reabsorbed also, ma'am. So the normal level is 0.5 to 1.2 milligram per deciliter, ma'am.
Okay. So Basically, serum creatinine is a measure of GFR.
Yes, ma'am.
Right?
Yes, ma'am.
How does GFR vary with serum creatinine? What is the normal
Ma'am,
GFR, Nisha?
Ma'am, 125 ml per minute, ma'am.
Okay. So, Nisha, how do you corroborate serum creatinine value with GFR?
Ma'am, it is inversely proportional, ma'am. As the serum creatinine increases, the GFR is reduced.
So, as serum creatinine value doubles, GFR decreases by
Yes, ma'am.
50%.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, okay, fine, Nisha, thank you. Now, Nivedita will tell me what are the limitations of serum creatinine as a reflection of GFR.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, Nivedita.
Sorry. Creatinine depends, value depends on the daily protein intake, ma'am, and
Yes.
and muscle mass.
Sorry, please say that again.
Depends on the muscle mass, daily protein intake, and
Age of the patient, physical activity, okay, and rate of catabolism. Okay, so what happens if there is advanced age and less muscle mass?
advanced age and less muscle mass, then creatinine value will be less, ma'am. If it is on a marginal side, then the kidneys are involved, ma'am. Like there is an injury to the kidney. Even with a little increase in creatinine, it might indicate that there is involvement of kidney failure.
Okay, so as Nisha before you said that creatinine is produced by the muscle. So if there is less muscle mass, so even if you have a 80-year-old patient coming with a creatinine of say 1.2, so that means that the kidney is involved. That is, the GFR is low. Okay. Now Pooja will tell me when do you need to be concerned? GFR, on the basis of GFR, can you define stages of chronic kidney disease? Pooja?
Yes, ma'am.
Why are we so bothered about GFR? On the basis of GFR, can you classify chronic kidney disease?
There are five, where you can divide them into 5 stages, ma'am. With the stage 1, the kidney damage with normal or increased GFR, that is GFR more than 90 ml per minute per 1 meter square. And the stage 2 is mild reduction in GFR with 60 to 89 ml per minute, and stage 3 ma'am, moderate reduction in GFR, and with stage 4 severe reduction in GFR 15 to 30 ml per minute, and stage 5 is kidney failure, the GFR less than 15 ml per minute.
Okay. So basically, through creatinine, what we try to measure is the GFR. Okay. And on the basis of GFR, kidney disease is classified. Okay, now Gautam will tell me how to calculate creatinine clearance. In other words, GFR, based on age, weight, and serum creatinine levels.
Yes, ma'am. Usually we calculate creatinine clearance with the help of Cockcroft Gault formula, ma'am. By using this formula, we'll 140 minus age into divided by the serum creatinine level into 72 and multiply this entire value by the body weight of the patient, will get a value, ma'am. That will be the creatinine clearance in case of males. And if we are calculating in a female, we'll be multiplying the entire value by 0.85, ma'am. This gives us a creatinine value.
Okay, fine. Now, Now, Samriti, can you tell me about the tubular function tests? Can you just name them?
Tubular function would be affected by urine concentration in urinary proteins and urinary glucose.
I can't hear you, Samriti. Can you please be a little clear? So basically you said, I think it is, yes, Samriti, tell me.
Tubular function can be affected by urine concentration, urinary proteins, urinary glucose.
Basically about free water clearance, water conservation, and sodium and urea conservation. Okay. Satish, can you explain what is fractional excretion of sodium and its clinical implication?
Ma'am, fractional excretion of sodium, ma'am.
Yes.
Like,
It's a function. It's a measurement of the tubular functions, no?
Ma'am, no, ma'am, I don't know, ma'am.
Okay, fraction excretion of sodium. Okay. Who will tell me? Varsha will tell me.
Sorry, ma'am, I don't know.
Okay. Vidhan?
Yes, ma'am.
What is fractional excretion of sodium?
Fractional excretion of sodium, percentage of sodium filtered by the kidney, which is excreted, is mainly differentiate.
It's a percentage of it expresses sodium clearance as a percentage of creatinine clearance.
Is
Okay.
mainly differentiate pre-renal euthymia and renal tubular necrosis.
Okay.
If fractionated sodium is less than 1%, that means is a pre-renal cause of renal failure. And if it's more than fractionated sodium is more than 2%, that means it's renal tubular necrosis.
Generally, what we say is 1%, 1 to 3%, and 3%. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So 1%, if the fractional excretion of sodium is, actually it's a very easy method. Okay, where you can do a spot urine sampling.
Yes, ma'am.
And you can see whether the fractional excretion of sodium is 1%. If it is, the value is 1% or less, it is generally indicates a dehydration or hypovolemia.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and if it's more than 3%, it is generally, it indicates that the tubular ability to conserve sodium is lost, which occurs in acute renal failure.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now coming to the effects of anesthesia on renal function. So Vijayvani.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, can you explain what happens when you give regional anesthesia? What happens to the renal blood flow?
Ma'am, when in central neuraxial blockade, like spinal anesthesia, epidural, the renal blood flow, actually, there is no much change in the.
We just learned, Vijayvani, that when there is when we give central neural axate, what happens is there is drop in blood pressure.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So if it is within the range of autoregulation, blood flow is maintained. Right. But if
Yes,
there is
ma'am.
persistent hypotension, what will happen?
Then the renal blood flow can decrease.
Then the renal blood flow will decrease, and the GFR, urinary flow, and sodium excretion will also decrease.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So that is why what we keep saying, no, in the OT you've realized that maintain a good map so as to maintain a good renal blood flow. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Now, okay, we've already discussed that when a patient is light in pain, tissue trauma and all, that causes sympathetic activation, and sympathetic activation can cause reduction in renal blood flow, GFR and urinary output. Okay, now Yazini will answer what are the direct anesthetic effects of volatile agents on kidney.
Ma'am, I don't know, ma'am. I haven't studied.
Yazini, what happens when you give anesthetic agents? They are basically cardiac
Cause
depressants.
hypotension.
Yes,
Cardiac
cardiac
depressant.
depressants, they decrease cardiac output. If cardiac output is decreased, what will decrease?
GFR,
Renal
renal
blood flow
plasma
will?
flow, and GFR will decrease.
Yes. So again, when you're giving volatile anesthetics in high doses, be careful of hypotension and decreasing cardiac output and consequent decrease in renal blood flow. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Now, Basavaraj, you tell me what sevoflurane, why is it generally not preferred in kidney patients?
Ma'am, there is some end product, ma'am. It is usually
What is that
nephrotoxic.
end product known as, commonly known as compound
Compound
A?
ma'am.
So so there is a general recommendation that a fresh glass flow of at least 2 liters per minute should be maintained with sevoflurane to prevent significant production of compound A. Okay. But recent studies have not actually found compound A, and it was just found in animals. But for theoretical purpose, this is important. All right. Okay, now Ankush will answer what is the effect of intravenous opioids on renal function?
What are the effects of intravenous opioids? They will also reduce the renal blood flow.
Very nice. What else?
Decrease in renal blood flow would lead to a decrease in GFR.
See, basically, what do opioids do? They relieve pain. They
Yes,
decrease the
decrease
sympathetic activity. So, if they decrease the sympathetic activity, they are renoprotective. Right? Okay. Now, Dwara will answer what is the effect of NSAIDs on renal function?
Yes, sir. NSAIDs NSAIDs decrease the production of prostaglandins, ma'am. So they in turn cause vasoconstriction. So there will be a decrease in the GFR if the patient
Basically, what
has
happens is vasodilators are stimulated. If there is decrease in GFR, a compensatory mechanism is there, okay, which causes release in prostaglandins and decrease in vascular resistance by prostaglandins to increase GFR. So that is lost, okay, if you give NSAIDs. Okay. There are some other commonly used drugs in the OT, and we'll also discuss their anesthetic implications. Jairam?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, you will tell me about mannitol.
Hello.
Yes, Jairam, you will tell me about mannitol. What is mannitol?
Osmotic diuretic, ma'am.
Very good. What is the dose of mannitol?
1 to 1.5 gram per kg body weight.
Okay. Mechanism of action, you had already told me it is an osmotic diuretic. What are the side effects of mannitol?
Hypovolemia, hypotension.
Hypotension. Why will there be hypotension?
because of diuresis.
Diuresis. What else? When you're giving mannitol to a cardiac patient, do you need to be very vigilant? What can happen?
Mannitol. Ischemia.
Mannitol causes what?
Electrolyte. I am not sure, ma'am.
Okay. So Rajeshwari will enlighten us.
Mannitol in cardiac patients, ma'am.
Yes. See, Rajeshwari, mannitol, what it does is basically it increases your intravascular volume first. Right? So sudden increase in intravascular volume can precipitate cardiac decomposition and pulmonary edema in patients with limited cardiac reserve. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
What happens? What are the other side effects of mannitol? Long term. One is hypotension, hypovolemia. Other, electrolyte imbalance. What can happen?
Hyponatremia.
Hyponatremia. Hypernatremia can all generally it is hypokalemia and hypernatremia. Why is there hypernatremia? Because water loss is more than the sodium loss. So more water is lost and less sodium is lost. So there is more concentration of sodium. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Coming to one of our very favorite drugs, Lasix. So Meghna will tell me effect of Lasix. How does Lasix act? Furosemide?
Ma'am, Lasix acts on the loop of Henle's sodium potassium 2 chloride transporter on that transporter. So that causes hyponatremia, hypokalemia.
Okay.
And also water loss. And also diuresis, water loss.
It causes diuresis. That is why we give it. It is generally used in edematous. There are basically two conditions where it is promoted: pulmonary edema and congestive cardiac failure. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, coming to Naresh. Can you name some potassium sparing diuretics?
Ma'am, spironolactone.
Okay, when is it used, spironolactone? What is its main advantage?
Ma'am, main advantage is potassium sparing only.
Okay. When, in which conditions is it given?
Ma'am, it
Where
is
does it
used in
act?
ma'am, it is used in hypertensive patients also and in congestive heart failure also.
Okay, and basically it acts it is a direct aldosterone receptor antagonist in collecting tubules. Okay, so it prevents sodium reabsorption in the collecting tubules. So it has, as we already studied, 5% of sodium is reabsorbed in the collecting tubule. So it has a limited activity, but the main advantage is it is useful in hyperaldosteronism. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Last question to Nisha. What happens in a laparoscopic surgery? What are the effects on renal blood flow?
Ma'am, reduced renal blood flow.
Why, Nisha?
Ma'am, because there is in laparoscopic surgery, ma'am, there is no, ma'am, there will be increased blood flow because carbon dioxide inhalation will increase the pressure on the IVC. So
No, Nisha, you were right earlier on. There's a decrease in renal blood flow. What happens is because of laparoscopic surgeries and increased pneumoperitoneum, there is a abdominal compartment-like syndrome.
Yes,
Okay. So there is direct pressure and decrease, mechanical compression and decrease. The renal artery is compressed. Okay. So it gives
Yes,
less blood. So that is why it is direct mechanical compression.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So this typically produces oliguria. So generally, you must have seen when you decrease pneumoperitoneum, sometimes there's good urine output also.
Yes, ma'am.
Right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Fine. Okay, so we have basically covered how urine is formed, nephron, renal blood flow, what regulates it, what are the markers, clinical markers, and some anesthetic drug interactions for renal blood flow by various drugs. Any questions, anybody?
Ma'am, can you please repeat that fact? How mannitol causes cardiac decompensation?
Yes, what happens is basically it is basically mannitol causes osmosis. Okay. So when there is osmosis, that increases the oncotic pressure. So whenever there is increase in oncotic pressure, it causes increase in the intravascular volume. So sometimes when you give very fast mannitol and there's suddenly increase in the intravascular volume, suppose there's a cardiac patient with an ejection fraction of 30-35%. Okay, so that can cause sudden decompensation if you give too fast mannitol or very high dose of mannitol. That can cause pulmonary edema and cardiac decompensation. Okay.
But otherwise, ma'am, mannitol is indicated in this CHF for pulmonary edema in at slow infusion.
Mannitol is a bad drug to give in pulmonary edema. Classics would be favored.
Okay.
Okay. Any other question? Okay, I am always available in urology OT. If there's any problem, please come and ask. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.